There's a divorce attorney in Los Angeles who told me something I haven't been able to shake. He's been practicing family law for 30 years. Thousands of divorces, every configuration of marital destruction you can imagine. And he said that over time, he started noticing patterns that had nothing to do with the things people think cause divorce. Not communication, not money, not infidelity specifically. Something else. He said, "Tell me what she does for a living, and I can predict with uncomfortable accuracy how the marriage will unfold." At first, I thought he was being cynical, reductive, looking for simple explanations where complexity actually ruled. But then he started listing correlations, specific professions that showed up disproportionately in his caseload, specific patterns of marital breakdown that aligned with specific career paths. Not perfect correlations, nothing in human behavior is perfect, but strong enough that he'd started mentally categorizing clients the moment they told him their wife's occupation. Today we're going to have a conversation that almost nobody has publicly, the relationship between female profession and marriage stability. Not because women shouldn't work, not because careers are bad, but because certain professional environments shape people in ways that make long-term partnership difficult, because certain jobs select for traits that conflict with marital success, and because men entering relationships deserve to understand what they're actually choosing when they choose someone whose daily life involves specific pressures, temptations, and psychological exposures. This isn't about judgment, it's about pattern recognition. And patterns, uncomfortable though they may be, contain information that can protect you from pain. Let me start with the foundational principle. Environment shapes personality more than character resists it. We like to believe that people are who they are, that character is fixed, that the woman you marry will remain the woman you married regardless of external circumstances. This belief is comforting and largely wrong. Human beings are adaptation machines. We adjust to our environment constantly. Our beliefs shift toward the beliefs around us. Our behaviors calibrate to what's rewarded and punished in our context. Our sense of normal is determined by what we're exposed to daily. You become like the 5 people you spend the most time with, not as metaphor, but as psychological reality. Exposure shapes us. Environment wins. This matters for marriage because her job is her primary environment. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, for years. That's not a minor influence. That's the dominant force shaping who she becomes, the people she works with, the stories she hears, the behaviors she witnesses, the values her context rewards. All of this accumulates into beliefs, expectations, and patterns that she brings home to you. Men evaluate women based on how they seem at the moment of evaluation, but you're not marrying the moment, you're marrying the trajectory, and the trajectory is largely determined by the environment she inhabits daily. If that environment pulls her away from what makes marriage work, your marriage will eventually reflect that pull. Let me talk about beauty industry environments, because this is where the pattern is most visible. Hair salons, nail shops, spas, esthetician studios. These are environments where women gather, where they talk. And what do they talk about? Relationships. Specifically, relationship problems. The salon chair is a confession booth. Women vent about husbands who disappoint them, about boyfriends who cheated, about marriages that feel dead, about all the ways men have failed them. Now imagine your wife is the one hearing these confessions daily for years. What happens to her psychology? She absorbs the negativity, not consciously. She doesn't choose to believe that all men are bad. But the repeated exposure creates a statistical impression. Man after man in these stories is disappointing, cheating, failing. Her sample is biased. She's hearing the complaints, not the successes, but her brain doesn't correct for sample bias. It just accumulates data, and the accumulated data says, men are the problem, men disappoint, men cheat, men fail. This is emotional contamination. Other people's problems become her worldview. She starts watching you through a lens shaped by 1,000 women's complaints. She starts seeing patterns that confirm what she's been absorbing. You do something mildly annoying and it triggers template recognition. You're just like all the others. The baseline trust that marriage requires gets eroded by exposure to distrust she didn't generate herself, and there's another layer, the comparison layer. She hears about the husband who bought his wife a Mercedes, the boyfriend who took his girlfriend to Paris, the man who sends flowers every week. She hears about the best moments of other relationships, the performative highlights. while living the mundane reality of her own. And over time, she starts wondering, why isn't my husband like that? Why don't I get what she gets? The comparison isn't fair. She's comparing your average to their peak. She's comparing your Tuesday to their anniversary. But fairness doesn't matter when comparison is constant. The drip of other women have it better accumulates into dissatisfaction that has nothing to do with your actual quality as a partner. Let me talk about jobs with constant male attention, because this creates a different problem. Receptionists at high-end venues, bartenders, gym front desk staff, pharmaceutical sales, real estate agents, promotional models. Any job where her appearance is part of her professional value and male attention is constant. That happens when attention is abundant. It loses value. The thing that should feel special, a man showing interest, finding her attractive, becomes background noise. She's so saturated with male attention that individual attention doesn't register. Your attention specifically, because you're just one of many. One voice in a chorus she hears all day. This creates ego inflation. She feels constantly desired, which sounds like it would make her confident, but actually makes her entitled. She develops an inflated sense of her market value because she's receiving constant feedback that she's desirable. But the feedback is skewed. Men hit on women at work without serious intent, testing casually, shotgunning attention, and she interprets casual interest as genuine demand. The result? She becomes harder to satisfy. Your appreciation doesn't feel significant because appreciation is her baseline. Your desire doesn't feel special because desire is what she experiences from everyone. You're not a man who chose her. You're just another man in a sequence of men who all chose her. And a man who's just one of many doesn't inspire the commitment that a man who feels uniquely special inspires. There's also devaluation that happens. When attention is abundant, each individual source of attention loses weight, including you. You become just her husband, just one option among many. She doesn't fear losing you because losing you doesn't feel like losing much. There are others who would take your place. The normal fear of loss that motivates relational investment, she doesn't feel it, and without that fear, investment declines. Let me address jobs where beauty is the product, because this takes the dynamic further. Models, promotional staff, booth girls, social media influencers, actresses optimizing for appearance, any job where her physical attractiveness is directly monetized. In these roles, she learns something specific. Her beauty has transactional value. Men will pay for access to it. Companies will pay to associate with it. Her appearance generates income, and this lesson, internalized over years, shapes how she sees herself and how she relates to you. When beauty is currency, every interaction becomes economic. She evaluates attention based on what it yields. She sees male interest as a market she's competing in, and you, the husband, become part of the economy rather than something separate from it. Did you provide enough for the access she granted? Are you paying market rate for her beauty? The transactional frame that governs her work leaks into how she thinks about everything. And there's the validation addiction. When your income depends on being desired, you need to be constantly checking whether you're still desirable. Likes, comments, looks from strangers, confirmation that you still have it. This becomes a psychological necessity, not just a professional one. And it doesn't stop when she comes home to you. The woman addicted to validation can't be satisfied by one man's attention, not because you're inadequate. Because singular attention doesn't provide the volume she needs the hit, the constant confirmation, the dopamine spike that comes from new attention rather than sustained attention. Your love, however genuine, is like asking an addict to be satisfied with one drink. The addiction requires more than you can provide. Let me talk about creative professions, because these carry different risks. Singers, dancers, actresses, artists, writers, women whose work involves emotional expression and performance. Creative work requires emotional access, the ability to feel intensely, to channel feelings into work, to experience life as material for creation. These are valuable traits for art. They're often destabilizing for relationships. The creative woman lives on emotional swings. She needs highs and lows to fuel her work. She experiences life at amplified volume, and when life is stable, when the marriage is working, when nothing dramatic is happening, she feels flat, unstimulated. The peace that a healthy marriage provides doesn't serve her creative needs. So she creates drama, not always consciously. But the pattern is consistent. The relationship becomes material. Your conflicts fuel her art. Your pain provides inspiration. The stability you're trying to build feels like creative death to her. She needs the emotional chaos you're trying to eliminate. And there's the performance dynamic. Her life becomes a show. She's always on, always presenting, always creating narrative. You become a character in her story rather than a partner in your shared life. Your relationship gets processed through her creative lens until it's unclear what's real and what's performance. Is she actually upset, or is this an emotional exercise? Is this genuine connection, or is she rehearsing? Many men married to creative women describe the same experience. They never know what's real. They're constantly wondering whether they're in a relationship or in a production. The instability that makes her artistically vital makes her relationally exhausting. Let me talk about jobs with physical intimacy, because the boundaries blur. Massage therapists, personal trainers, physical therapists, spa service providers, fitness instructors who do one-on-one work. Any profession where her hands are on bodies, or bodies are close to hers, these professions require physical contact that, in other contexts, would be intimate. Touching, closeness, bodies in vulnerable positions. Professional ethics create boundaries. But boundaries aren't walls, they're lines, and lines can be crossed. The risk isn't that she'll definitely cross them. The risk is that the proximity to intimacy normalizes what would otherwise feel transgressive. The 100 clients she touches professionally desensitize her to touch. The physical closeness loses meaning. And when physical closeness loses meaning, the barrier between professional contact and inappropriate contact erodes. Men in these clients' positions are also pursuing her. Not all of them, but some. The personal trainer whose client becomes flirtatious. The massage therapist whose client pushes boundaries. She's experiencing low-grade sexual approach constantly, wrapped in professional context that makes it harder to reject cleanly. Every week, men are testing whether the professional boundary is actually firm. And here's what men at home don't see. She's in a constant environment of physical approach and attraction. Even if she never crosses a line, she's swimming in water that makes crossing easier than it would be for someone in a normal office job. The opportunity is constant. The desensitization is gradual. And opportunity plus desensitization plus time equals risk. Let me address high-powered business careers, because this creates different issues. Executive women, entrepreneurs, high-earning professionals, women who've prioritized career above everything else and succeeded. These women have developed traits that work in business but corrode in marriage: independence, self-sufficiency, unwillingness to depend on anyone, competitive orientation, prioritization of winning. These traits built their careers. They destroy their relationships. Marriage requires interdependence, the ability to need and be needed, the willingness to depend on someone else, the capacity to put partnership above individual achievement. But she's spent decades training the opposite. She's trained to not need anyone, to compete rather than cooperate, to prioritize her success over communal outcomes. When she brings this home, the marriage becomes a competition. She's not your partner, she's your rival. Her success and your success feel zero-sum. She can't subordinate her priorities to family because subordination feels like weakness. Every discussion becomes a negotiation. Every conflict becomes a case to win. The cooperative spirit that makes marriage function is alien to her professional programming. And there's the family deprioritization. Her career came first for 15 years. Children and home were deferred. When they finally arrive, if they do, they're competing against deeply ingrained work identity. She doesn't know how to be present for family because presence was never rewarded. She doesn't know how to slow down because slowness feels like failure. The kids get delegated. The home gets outsourced. You get scheduled like a meeting. Let me address psychology and coaching professions, because these carry unique toxicity. Therapists, life coaches, counselors, women whose professional identity involves understanding and guiding others' psychology. On paper, this seems ideal. She understands human behavior. She has tools for communication. She should be great at relationships. In practice, it often works opposite. She becomes the expert in the relationship. Not your partner, your analyst. Every conflict gets pathologized. Your normal emotions become symptoms. Your reasonable positions become defense mechanisms. She has vocabulary to dismiss your perspective and framing to make herself superior. You're being defensive. That's your attachment style talking. This is clearly unprocessed trauma. The therapeutic language becomes weaponry. She's not arguing with you, she's diagnosing you. And the diagnosis always favours her position because she's the one with the professional authority to diagnose. This creates massive power imbalance. You're not having a discussion between equals. You're being assessed by an expert who's already concluded you're the problem. Your attempts to advocate for yourself get reframed as resistance. Your emotions get categorized as pathology. The relationship becomes therapy where she's always the therapist and you're always the patient who won't accept her interpretation. Many men married to psychologists describe feeling perpetually analysed, never able to just be, never able to have a normal argument, everything filtered through clinical framework that positions her as healthy and you as needing correction. Let me talk about athletics and competition, because this creates its own issues. Professional athletes, competitive fitness, sports coaches, women whose lives centre on physical competition and performance. Athletic women are addicted to adrenaline. Competition provides massive dopamine spikes. Training involves pushing through discomfort for reward. Her entire neurological system is calibrated for intensity, for winning, for the high that comes from physical achievement. What happens when she retires, or when competition becomes less central? The family routine doesn't provide the adrenaline she needs. Home life feels flat. You feel flat. The stable partnership you're offering competes against the neurological baseline she established through years of intense physical competition. She starts seeking the missing stimulation, sometimes through inappropriate exercise obsession, sometimes through creating drama at home, sometimes through pursuing intensity outside the marriage. The adrenaline has to come from somewhere, and if you're not providing it, she'll find a source that does. There's also the competitive orientation that doesn't switch off. She's trained to win, to beat opponents, to dominate competitions, and you become the opponent she can't stop competing against. Your accomplishments trigger her competitiveness rather than her pride. Your success feels like her loss. The teamwork marriage requires conflicts with the competitive wiring she's developed over decades. Let me address media and visual professions, because these shape values. Photographers, journalists, media producers, content creators, women who work in industries that shape public narrative and visual culture. These industries have specific value systems, progressive on social issues, permissive on sexual boundaries, skeptical of traditional structures, hostile to conventional family values. The woman who works in these environments absorbs these values by osmosis, not because she's weak, because environment shapes everyone. Over time, her views on marriage, family, and relationships shift toward what her industry normalizes. Open relationships get framed as evolved rather than destabilizing. Children become optional lifestyle accessories rather than central purpose. Traditional gender dynamics become oppression rather than functional arrangement. Her environment teaches her to see your values as backwards, and her industry's values as progress. The gap between you widens without either of you choosing it. You hold values from outside her industry. She absorbs values from inside it. By year 5, you're barely speaking the same moral language. Not because either of you betrayed each other, because her environment reshaped her without your consent or awareness. Let me address the central point. Career choice reveals character. A woman doesn't randomly fall into a profession. She chooses it, or she's drawn to it based on who she is. The career isn't just a job. It's an expression of her internal priorities, needs, and values. The woman drawn to the beauty industry often values appearance highly. The woman drawn to performance often needs attention. The woman drawn to high-powered business often prioritizes status over connection. The woman drawn to psychology often wants to understand because she has something unresolved. The career choice is diagnostic. It tells you something about who she is underneath. This doesn't mean everyone in a profession is identical, but it means that professions select for types. The sample of women who become promotional models is different from the sample that becomes accountants. The selection pressures that each career applies filter for different traits. When you date someone in a profession, you're dating someone who passed through that profession's filter. And the filter reveals what it's selected for. Let me address the illusion that she'll change, because men believe this constantly. Once we're married, she'll settle down. Once we have kids, she'll prioritize family. Once she's away from that environment, she'll become different. This is almost always wrong. Personality is plastic early in life and increasingly rigid with age. By the time she's 25, 30, 35, the patterns are established. The values are set. The orientations are fixed. Marriage doesn't transform people. Children don't transform people. You don't transform people. The woman you marry is the woman you'll have. The patterns that exist before marriage will intensify after it. The woman addicted to validation will seek it after marriage. The woman who prioritizes career will continue prioritizing it. The woman whose job shapes her toward distrust of men will carry that distrust into your home. You are not the exception. You're not so special that you override decades of psychological formation. What you see is what you get. What you don't see will reveal itself after commitment makes exit costly. Let me talk about commitment and fear of loss, because certain professions eliminate this. Marriage stability requires something counterintuitive: fear of loss, not terror, not obsession, but the recognition that losing this relationship would cost something significant. That fear motivates investment, motivates working through difficulty, motivates not blowing up the relationship over temporary frustration. Women in high-attention professions don't feel this fear. They know, they've demonstrated daily, that male attention is abundant. They know that if this relationship ends, another will begin. The line of interested men stretches around the block. She can see them. She works with them. They approach her constantly. When the option to leave feels costless, the motivation to stay diminishes. Why work through this conflict when you can just start fresh with someone who doesn't annoy you yet? Why tolerate his flaws when there's a line of men without those specific flaws? The fear of loss that would make her fight for the marriage doesn't exist because loss doesn't feel real to her. This is why women with abundant options have higher divorce rates, not because they're bad people, but because they can leave easily. The abundance undermines the commitment. The options undermine the exclusivity. She's not fully in because she never has to be fully in. Let me give you the framework, because this is what you need to hold. When you're evaluating a woman for long-term partnership, you're not just evaluating her, you're evaluating her world, her environment, the forces that shape her daily, the values she's absorbing, the influences she can't escape. You're marrying her context as much as you're marrying her. Ask yourself, what does her job expose her to? What psychological effects would that exposure create over time? What values does her industry promote? What traits did her profession select for? What will she become through years of continued exposure? These aren't fun questions. They feel clinical, unromantic, judgmental. But marriage isn't a romance movie. It's a decades-long partnership, and decades of environmental influence will shape her regardless of how she seems right now. The woman standing before you today is the woman shaped by yesterday's environment. The woman you'll be married to in 10 years will be shaped by the next decade's environment. Know what that environment is. Let me provide practical guidance. What to actually evaluate. First, assess her daily exposure. Who does she spend her working hours with? What stories does she hear? What behaviors does she witness? What's considered normal in her context? This is the water she swims in. And fish don't notice water, which means she doesn't notice how it's shaping her. Second, assess her attention environment. How much male attention does she receive daily? What has that done to her expectations? Can singular attention from you possibly compete with the volume she receives professionally? Is she satiated or is she hungry? Because satiated isn't available for what marriage offers. Third, assess her values alignment. What does her industry believe about relationships? Fourth, assess her priorities revealed by choice. Why did she choose this profession? What does that choice reveal about what she values? What need is the career meeting? Is that need compatible with what marriage requires? Fifth, assess her current patterns. Is she already showing signs of the risks her profession creates? Validation seeking, comparison-driven dissatisfaction, competitive orientation toward you. Trust it. Patterns don't improve with marriage, they intensify. Let me close with the frame I want you to hold. This isn't about saying certain women are bad. It's about saying certain environments create certain risks. The woman is not her profession, but her profession shapes her. The person is not their environment, but environment wins long term. The character you see today is not immune to influence. Character adapts to context. When you choose a partner, you're choosing to merge your life with everything that shapes hers. Her job isn't something she does from 9 to 5, it's the dominant environmental influence on who she becomes, the exposures, the values, the daily reinforcement of certain patterns. All of this comes home with her. All of this shapes your marriage. All of this determines outcomes that seem mysterious until you trace them back to their source. Men get blindsided by marriages that deteriorate. They don't understand why she changed, why she became dissatisfied, why the comparison and competition emerged, why the validation seeking increased, why the commitment diminished. They don't trace it back to the 8 hours a day she spends in an environment specifically designed to produce exactly these outcomes. I'm not saying avoid all women in these professions. Some navigate these environments without being shaped negatively. Exceptions exist. Strong character can resist environmental pressure, though not forever and not without support. What I am saying is, understand the risks, weight them appropriately. Don't be naive about what you're accepting when you accept someone whose daily life involves specific psychological pressures. The divorce attorney I mentioned, the one who predicts outcomes based on profession, he's not a pessimist, he's a pattern recognizer. He's seen enough data to know that certain inputs produce certain outputs, and he's trying to share that pattern recognition with men who haven't yet accumulated the data themselves. Consider this a similar effort. I'm sharing patterns that predict outcomes. Not guaranteeing outcomes, patterns. Strong correlations based on how environment shapes people and how shaped people function in marriages. You can ignore the patterns. Many men do. They believe love conquers all, that she's different, that his relationship will be the exception. Some of them are right, most of them aren't. The patterns exist because they describe how things usually go. Usually isn't always, but usually is what you should bet on when you're making decisions that will define the next 40 years of your life. Choose wisely, evaluate thoroughly, and understand that you're not just choosing a woman, you're choosing everything that shapes her. Her profession is near the top of that list. It deserves your attention before you commit your life. I have more content on partner selection, on evaluating relationship probability, on understanding the factors that actually predict marital success. Links in the description if this resonates. For now, tell me in the comments, what patterns have you observed? What professions have you seen create relationship problems? What did you wish you'd known before you committed to someone whose environment was working against your marriage? Share the pattern so others can learn before they pay the price you paid. That's it for today. Look beyond the person to the environment that shapes them. Understand that environment wins. And remember, you're not marrying who she is today. You're marrying who her context is making her become.